Bilt Hamber Double Speed and Bilt Hamber Finis Wax. Both really good waxes, but what are the differences between them and which is better for you? Let me try and explain. Hello and welcome back to the Golf Diaries. My name's Mark and this is the home of all things VW and detailing. Now, Bilt Hamber paste waxes. What are the differences between double speed wax and Finis Wax? Now, I've been a long time user of Bilt Hamber products of all kinds, but I've yet to see an explanation of what the difference is between double speed and Finis. So hopefully this is that explanation right here. Now, very quickly, I should start by saying there is another protective wax in the Bilt Hamber range, Autobalm. I'll put a link to the video I did about Autobalm down below. But today we're not talking about Autobalm, which is pretty much a protectant, very anti-corrosive kind of protectant, last stage protection for your vehicle. I'm talking about the two Carnauba based waxes in the Bilt Hamber range. Now, very shortly, I'll show you an application video on my Land Rover Defender of both waxes and then show you the water behaviour shortly after applying them. But first of all, I just want to take a couple of minutes just to explain what each of the waxes are and what on paper, I should say, are the differences between them. So let's start with double speed wax. So this is the cheaper of the two waxes, and at the moment, time of recording, $16.95 for a 250ml tin. So on the face of it, really good value for money. Now, it's based on T1 Carnauba, but it's also fortified with polymers. Now, this claims to give it a good self-cleaning ability. So on to Finis Wax. Some people say Finis, I say Finis, French A-level, don't you know? There you go. So I know that means finish wax, if that helps. You probably could have guessed that, even if you don't speak French. But Finis Wax is the more expensive of the two waxes. It's almost twice as expensive at time of recording at $32.95 for 250 millilitres. Now, this is like double speed, T1 Carnauba based, but this is very much billed as the glossier wax of the two. And I have to say, past experience on certain colours, and I'll go back to that shortly, proves that to be the case. It is a very glossy, almost show wax type finish. It's an impressive finish. In terms of what makes this slightly different from a lot of other Carnauba waxes, though, is that instead of using strong solvents to help obviously layer the wax out, it actually uses some gloss enhancers which do the same job. So obviously that has the double whammy, if you like, of adding gloss to the finish, as well as making it super easy to spread. Are you with me so far? Now, you might have noticed that this is the older branding, and that's because this is a tub I've had for an absolute age. And I've used it several times now on the Defender and a couple of other cars, and I don't know whether that's going to pick it up, but actually, there's not a lot being used. And now, as long as you store waxes carefully, of course, they are almost... They'll kind of store almost indefinitely. But I mean, that must be at least 6 years old. Yet still, straight out the tin, very oily, very easy to spread, very almost butter-like. So very different consistency to double speed. Now, Bilt Hamber say that double speed is their durability wax. And with claims of 6 months per application. Again, I've got to be honest, I've never experienced that amount of time, but then again, I haven't used it that often, and being a detailer, I never leave anything for 6 months anyway. So, but I was certainly seeing it beginning to die off after probably about the 4-month mark, I would say, from memory. So yeah, I haven't seen 6 months, but you know, I'm not saying that it's not possible by any means. The other thing that Bilt Hamber say is that double speed is very much more suited to lighter colours, whereas the Finis, I don't know why I keep showing you the tins, I'm sure you remember what they look like, but the Finis is very much more suited towards darker colours. I should also add that neither wax has got any abrasives in, no fillers, nothing like that, because very often you will see when you hear a manufacturer claim that a particular wax is good for dark colours and another wax is good for lighter colours. That's because the darker colour wax has some fillers in, which obviously helps kind of cover up some of those imperfections which are a bit more highlighted on darker colours. That is not the case with the Bilt Hamber products. Now, one of the reasons that the double speed wax is touted as a durable wax is because it's designed to be very chemically resistant. So obviously that's ideal for when you're doing multiple washes over a longer period of time. This is going to stand up to that chemical attack on a regular basis more so than the Finis. However, the Finis party trick is that it's more element repellent. So in theory, again, this is all theory, in theory for winters, things like that, where it is exposed to ongoing attack from rain, snow, sleet, whatever, the Finis wax would be the one to go with. Now, before we get to the application, I should just say right here, right now, instead of making you wait till the end of the video, I'm going to tell you right now what I found in real world use. And that is that the Finis wax is exactly that. The Finis wax is very, very good as a winter wax. I've actually found this to be as durable as the double speed. Okay, I've used this more than I've used the double speed, but I have found it to be as durable as a double speed. On the darker colours like the Land Rover, it just looks that little bit different. I'll show you in a second, please be patient. And yeah, it certainly lasts through. I've put it on the Land Rover on a couple of winters now, and it does last through winter, albeit with the odd top up and things like that. But as a base coat for the winter, it does an exceptionally good job. So in a nutshell, and I'll get to the application then, double speed wax on paper if you are looking for value for money, for durability, for resistance to chemical attack and frequent washing, and you've got a lighter coloured car. Finis wax on the other hand, deeper, glossier look, more suited to darker colours, a little bit more expensive, a little bit glossier, and a little bit easier to use. That's what it says on paper. Let's get to the application and we can judge for ourselves. Starting with double speed wax. So on the left of the panel will be double speed, on the other will be Finis. So with double speed, you start with a damp applicator, not wet, just damp, and then take a little bit and then you can start to apply in a circular motion. Now you need to make sure, as with any wax, that you're not kind of putting too much pressure on the paint. You are literally just rubbing the product across the surface of the paintwork. Now, on this Land Rover, you'll see that the panel is moving a little bit because, well, frankly, that panel is paper thin. The wind can even move that panel, and I kid you not. But the product applies really easily, spreads a long way, little goes a long way. For such a hard wax, it's not too bad to apply at all. Moving on to Finis. Now this, you might be able to see actually on the paintwork there that it's slightly oilier, and being slightly oilier, it does spread a lot more easily. It's very much like butter, and that's no exaggeration. It's lovely and smooth to kind of glide across the paintwork. So very little effort required in applying it whatsoever. Again, a little goes a long way. Circular motions. You don't need to have a damp applicator for Finis wax because the extra oiliness kind of negates the need for that. Now, with both of these waxes, you need to leave it for about 5 or 10 minutes. And on this particular day, it was actually 7 minutes to this point where the man from Del Monte says, yes, good to go. And you start to remove the wax. Now, with double speed, again, difficult to see just from this, but there's a little bit of effort in that first wipe over with the cloth. Now, I'm using a short pile microfiber. I find that to be slightly better than a long pile for removing wax, certainly this particular wax. And then just one final rub over to get rid of any residue that just happens to be lurking. So yeah, it's not difficult to remove whatsoever, but there is a little bit more effort required to double speed than perhaps with some other waxes on the market. It leaves a lovely slick finish though. So now moving on to the Finis side. And again, I think what hopefully will come across here is just how much easier this is to actually remove. Again, you're not rubbing the paint, you're hoping that the cloth is going to do the work for you and just take the wax off the surface. And on this side, on the Finis wax side, it really does. It comes off really easily. Now, I wouldn't say it's hugely different from double speed, but it certainly is just that little bit easier to remove. Fumbling there with the microfiber. Got there eventually. So yeah, the final wipe down left a really glossy finish. And I have to say, you can tell the difference in the flesh. You just struggle a little bit on camera, but the Finis wax side is definitely, yeah, a little bit glossier. So now the water behaviour. This is what you've been waiting for. So that's double speed. and you can see it sheeting quite nicely. Moving across to the Fini side. Still a good sheeter, but just a little bit slower than the double speed. Now you can't tell on this particular panel with it being a vertical panel because the water's just running straight off, but in terms of beading, the Fini Wax side does bead a little bit better. Might see a little bit more from this angle, but yeah, the Fini Wax I can tell you does bead rather well from past usage of it. So that's the application. Nothing particularly difficult about either of those. It's basically a little bit of common sense, not putting it on too thick, etc., and not leaving it to cake onto the paintwork for too long. So both easy to use. As I said earlier, I do think the Fini Wax is just that little bit easier to remove, but it's marginal. I'm really splitting hairs here. It is a little bit easier, and I do feel that whether it picks up on camera, I'll know very shortly when I start to edit, but I do feel that on that grey, you can see just a slightly glossier finish. But again, it's so minor. The truth is that you could wax your car of any colour with either of these waxes. They'll both last you a long time. They're both reasonably easy to use. And if you see your car in isolation in a car park, or someone seeing it for the first time after you've waxed it, it will look lovely. It will look absolutely lovely. You could put a car, identical paintwork, next to it. Have one in Fini Wax, one in double speed wax. I defy anybody to see the difference. The only time you really see the difference is when you put them side by side on the same panel in the same light. Then you see a difference, and it's minor. So I wouldn't get too hung up on this one looks better than that one. They've got slightly different looks. The Fini is slightly warmer, difficult to tell on grey because it's not a particularly warm colour, but it is slightly warmer, whereas the double speed is a little bit more sealant-like. No surprise, as it's polymer fortified. But again, it's horses for courses, and you might prefer the warmer look, you might prefer the glassier look. That's personal to you. So in preparing this video and filming the application, and from my previous experience of using both products, I've tried to think long and hard as to how best to actually differentiate them, to help you understand what the difference is. And the truth is, it's very difficult, and this is probably why there aren't any YouTube or many YouTube videos out there explaining the difference between Fini Wax and double speed wax, because the difference is so small. I personally would always reach for the Fini Wax. Don't get me wrong, double speed wax is a great wax. I would have no problem putting that on any of my vehicles, genuinely, even the show cars, no problem whatsoever. But for me, the Fini Wax is just that tiny bit easier. It's just that tiny bit, I guess, what waxing a car should be. It's just that little bit more enjoyable. The gloss is just a little bit better. It just does everything that little bit better. And in detailing, very often we're chasing marginal gains. For me, Fini Wax give you those marginal gains over the double speed wax, but only you can decide whether it's worth twice the price. Now, don't get me wrong, as far as waxes go, $32.95 for Fini Wax is really not that expensive compared to some on the market, but $16.95 for that is really good value. So for once, normally I'll stand here and say it's not all about price, but for once I would say it pretty much does come down to price, and whether you like that slightly warmer look or that slightly more clinical, glassy, sealant type look. The choice is yours. The fact is, they're both really good waxes. You can't go wrong with either. But for me, I will always reach for Fini. Now, hopefully that's been of help. I'm kind of standing here now thinking, have I actually given a conclusion here? I hope I've given a conclusion. Please let me know in the comments below if that's been of any help to you whatsoever. But honestly, trying to differentiate these products beyond the descriptions on the website and beyond the just initial impressions when you open the tin, it's really quite difficult. But hopefully that's been of help. Yeah, let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. And if this video wasn't enough Bilt Hamber for you, right here you can see my Bilt Hamber playlist, which shows all the kinds of products from Bilt Hamber that I've been using and what my thoughts on them are.